As simple as it may seem at first glance, Hoodwinked has far more to offer than just a goofy take on fairy tales. The film is actually commenting on racism, sexual assault, and capitalism, and though it is not obvious at first glance, these things will be apparent here soon as we dive deep into Hoodwinked here on The Secret Lore. The first theory we have to deal with is also our shortest because it is the most apparent and easiest to see as a weak-minded viewer. This theory, of course, deals with the racism within the world of Hoodwinked. Hoodwinked, of course, is set up as a fairy tale world with many different animals within the forest interacting with one another. These animals appear to coexist just fine, but upon closer inspection, it can be seen that there is some hostility held within a few characters. For example, the frog detective character Nikki Flippers at one point calls Chief Grizzly Fuzzy Wuzzy, commenting on the fur that the bear has. This could be seen as a slur of some sort within the world of Hoodwinked, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. The wolf character goes one step further, dressing up as a sheep in disguise in order to get some information on the Goody Bandit, the central villain of the film. This choice could easily be seen as something that's just in bad taste, but Wolf goes, yet again, a step further, later in the film saying the term, "Never trust a bunny." The wolf character utters this phrase twice when he realizes that the Goody Bandit and the main villain of the film is actually the rabbit Boingo. Given that this is a large forest, it is all but certain there are other rabbits around the forest, and saying you can never trust any of them is very problematic. Going one step further, all characters refer to the rabbit character Boingo as a bunny, which may also be seen as a derogatory term towards the species. While this may seem alarming to many viewers, it actually explains a good bit at what the writers were trying to accomplish throughout this story. None of the characters that we see throughout the film are without flaw. From Red Riding Hood stealing her grandmother's recipe out of the vault to take it to the top of the mountain, to Granny Puckett secretly leading a double life as an extreme athlete. No character is without flaw. You can never know if one is truly good because people are not truly good. This is very similar to the film The Hateful Eight, where in that film all of the characters are inherently bad people, yet somehow you are challenged as an audience member to relate and root for at least a few of them throughout the film. Hoodwinked uses this very same tactic with its characters, and pulls it off arguably in a much better way. It's an alarming yet interesting piece of what makes Hoodwinked so interesting, but this is of course only the first theory we have to look at today. Our second theory is going to deal with why Hoodwinked looks the way it does, why its animation looks so cheap and stagnant. Many weaker-minded people would simply write this off as a budgetary restraint of the film, but the explanation goes far deeper than one would think. But in order to understand it, we need to stare up Granny Puckett's skirt. In this scene where Granny Puckett is flying through the air, something is amiss. You can see directly up her skirt. It's gratuitous and seems out of place, yet somehow it made it into this film. But upon closer inspection, measuring, and zooming, I was able to figure out that Granny Puckett's genitalia is nowhere to be seen. I had spent hours looking at this footage, trying to get different versions of the film, and look through those to see if there were ever a point where her genitalia did in fact show up, and it seems that it was never included in the film. In fact, none of the characters, to my knowledge, scanning through every frame of Hoodwinked, have genitalia. It is a very curious predicament. At first, I had thought that this was because perhaps the characters were toys, and this was all taking place within the imagination of a little girl, playing with her toys, imagining fairy tales within the forest. And while that still may be a possibility, I think that my next explanation is far closer to the truth. The reason the characters look so cheap and unappealing and don't have genitalia actually has to do with the distribution of the film, for you see, it was picked up by the Weinstein Company. The Weinstein Company is of course named for Harvey Weinstein, and once his name is brought into the fold, things become far clearer than they were before. You see, if these animated characters were any more appealing, or if they had genitalia of any sort, Harvey Weinstein most likely would have sexually assaulted them the first chance he got. It's an explanation that makes too much sense to overlook. This is why the animation looks stagnant and choppy in some areas. This is why it looks so cheap, and this is why Granny Puckett's vagina is nowhere to be found. For if Granny Puckett's vagina was in fact in the film, Harvey Weinstein would have tried to have a go at it. Now, of course, either of these theories could work in the case of Hoodwinked, the imagination of a little girl or the effects of a serial sexual assaulter and rapist in Harvey Weinstein being the cause for the animation looking the way it does. But there is one thing we do know after viewing these two possibilities. It certainly wasn't just because of budgetary restraints. But now, we must move on to our third and final theory. One theory that, believe it or not, has been brought up in the past. Our last theory on Hoodwinked today may be the most interesting in all of the history of the secret lore, for as I stated, I am not the first one to bring this theory up, but I do believe I am the first one to make this theory coherent. For you see, in February of 2006, author Timothy Sexton released an article titled Hoodwinked, a postmodern examination of the dangers of runaway capitalism. The article speaks to how Hoodwinked is actually a commentary on big business and the troubles when capitalism is left unchecked. The author Timothy Sexton goes on to say, quote, Hoodwinked, that silly little cartoon about Little Red Riding Hood, turns out to be the most subversive movie released nationwide since Fahrenheit 9/11. It should also be stated that Timothy Sexton is not just some idiot goofing off on the internet making up fake theories because he thinks it's funny. This is a real-life author who has released actual books before, and he actually wholeheartedly believes what he's saying here. That being said, this makes Timothy Sexton look completely butt-fuck insane. But adding on top of this even further, the original article seems to have been taken down. The main evidence for its existence are quotes from one of the movie's writer-directors, Corey Edwards. On a blog post from Corey Edwards, most of the article, it seems, was archived, with some major quotes coming through that, again, make Timothy Sexton look like a complete and utter insane person. Now is the time that I will try to focus what Timothy Sexton was trying to say within this theory, as well as adding my own aspects to it as we move along. You see, Timothy Sexton's main flaw with what I was able to see of his theory is that he does not make it focus on the characters within the film, which seems to be the main thing Hoodwinked is trying to comment on. While the film definitely does focus on capitalism and the idea of this big business crushing these small businesses with the goody bandit stealing recipes, the literal characters are what interest me far more, for it seems that the rabbit character Boingo is supposed to be a direct representation of these big business figureheads such as Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, or Markiplier. These big business figureheads are the far more interesting aspect of the theory. Most of the commentary within Hoodwinked about capitalism is very simplistic until you see that character, Boingo, the small, cute, fluffy rabbit that deep down inside is actually pure evil. This is, of course, the heart of the commentary Hoodwinked is trying to get after. It's this idea that the top of these big businesses are two-faced, one side cute and fluffy, the other pure evil, that truly brings the commentary on capitalism full circle, with the defeat of the entire business that Boingo is trying to set up. Now, whether or not this commentary was intentional can be seen on Corey Edwards' blog, where after going through most of the parts of Timothy Sexton's article, he says, quote, "If Mr. Sexton sees my movie as a sermon against megacorporations monopolizing America, that's fine. But our villain is just as easily the face of every dictator in history, or every schoolyard bully who is compensating for low self-esteem, or any mafia boss who dominates by either absorbing or wiping out his competition." What Corey Edwards is effectively saying in this statement is, it's fine if you believe there is capitalistic commentary within Hoodwinked, but if you do believe there is capitalistic commentary within Hoodwinked, you're most likely reading into it too far because it applies to so many other things. Now, I've done my best to describe what Timothy Sexton is trying to say about capitalism within Hoodwinked, but this theory really only has two paths left to go down. The first path being Timothy Sexton is 100% correct, and Corey Edwards accidentally made a brilliant commentary piece on capitalism in 2005 America. Or this theory could go down the second path, which states that Timothy Sexton is completely butt-fucking insane. Which path the theory goes down is up to you, the audience, but I like to think that Timothy Sexton maybe perceived something that Corey Edwards couldn't even perceive himself, because Timothy Sexton is that special of a person, and he's that smart and talented. Hopefully Timothy Sexton has this article plastered to his wall proudly, so he can look on it every morning and say to himself, boy oh boy, am I special. But that of course is just one thing that we can hope here on The Secret Lore. After viewing these three theories, it becomes obvious that Hoodwinked has far more to offer its audiences than just a fun spin on fairy tales. It has a lot of current-day real-world commentary that went overlooked at the film's initial release, and hopefully now, when you go to watch Hoodwinked for the first time or rewatching it, you'll have a whole new perspective on what this film is truly about. And remember, even if what you believe is completely butt-fucking insane, it will always have a place here on The Secret Lore.